I am Larry Gussin. This is my apartment. I've been a climate activist and techie. Our lunch is going to be a Cob salad, and I'll get into why I picked that. But if you look at this, there's greens, hard-boiled egg, avocado, potatoes. It's traditional Cob salad minus the bacon or the brisket or the pork loin. We're going to use instead is one of the many recipes in MEATY. MEATY is Mycelium route, what's underneath mushrooms. This company MEATY is making this and selling it, actually a lot of it, with hardly any additives except for spice, enormous amounts of protein, nothing unhealthy in it. And it's designed to be a swap-out dish for pork loin, chicken breast. And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to cook it up and add it to the Cob salad, and that will be our lunch. Unlike the Impossible Burger, which emulates ground beef or pork, this is a whole cut, you can see, and it's meant to be chewy, and you'll see that it is chewy. It's 4.5 ounces. It costs about $4 right now. I'm simply going to put it in an oil pan for 7 or 8 minutes, turning it every couple minutes, and that's about it. Fermentation is a big deal in the alternative protein world. Fermentation goes back on every continent, as far back as humans go, starting actually before cooking with some of the earliest humans harvesting fermented things from the ground and eating them. Much is happening with fermentation that is both very high tech and low tech. This is pretty low tech. The whole point of this company's MEATY is that it has the chewiness and the flavor that gets you about 2/3 of the way to pork loin or chicken breast or filet. YouTube cooking school quality. You can see the way that it's browning. Yeah. I mean, it looks like meat, or it gets close.
Well, Larry, thank you for cooking the gorgeous meal. I mean, I'm looking forward to tasting it, but I'd say just it looks beautiful.
Humans eat 5 times as much animal products total as they did 60 years ago.
This really does work. Like when I was having the MEATY on its own, it was fine. It had no unpleasant flavor. There was a nice texture to it. It wasn't something I would really seek out. But in the context of the dish, which is really the intention of it, is it really does it's a different texture, it's a different flavor profile that complements the salad. And that's more the way, like we were saying, that's more the way we should be eating anyway, which is most of the volume is just traditional plant-based food, like this is, and the alternative proteins are a element of the dish, not the focus of the dish, which is even if we're eating meat, that's how we should be eating. There's how healthy is it for me? How healthy is it for the planet? How expensive is it? How tasty is it? And those are kind of like the 4 elements. I guess you could add ease of preparation is sometimes important.
A wheel that describes what you were just talking about. The outer rim and the inner rim. The outer rim are the environmental tipping points starting with climate change that we all face. The inner rim are health metrics. And so both of them spin. You're trying to line up a way forward that both works for health and works for environmental tipping points and, of course, tastes good. Humans raise and kill and eat 80 billion animals a year, on track for 100 billion by 2040. And that's up from around 20 billion 50 years ago. It's a lot of animals. That puts enormous pressure on climate. Food systems cause 1/3 of global greenhouse gases, on water resources, on land resources. Roughly half the habitable land in the world is used for animal agriculture. Have agreed that by 2050 we have to hit net zero. And it's segment by segment. Cars, buildings, somehow we have to be net zero on all these things. And that was established 15 years ago. 5 years ago, the EAT-Lancet Commission came out and they said, we have to apply the same model to food systems. And while there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system, basically we have to reduce the human consumption of animal products. And we're not calling for the end of it at all. And it's going to be different for different countries. And we have a metric on what we call planetary and human health diet. It's a reference diet on various types of animal products, in addition to the replacements. But long story short, in the United States, there would have to be a 75% reduction from 4 years ago in the consumption of animal products, human consumption of animal products by American citizens by 2050. Basically, you have 2 things to work with. One is this just emerging thing called alternative proteins, and the other is dietary change. We don't eat the way our great-grandparents eat. If we simply did that, we'd be getting close to the EAT-Lancet. And so how do you build up an awareness campaign and a change campaign? It's difficult, but we already have within the climate movement models of doing that. It's enormously daunting, but if alternative proteins can come in and over the next 25 years take a third of that or even half of it, then you're saying to people, we think we see a model where over the next couple generations, we don't have to change our diet 75% because alternative proteins are going to replace dairy, at least liquid dairy, some cheeses, and some meat. And so you can build an awareness campaign that says not that you have to change your diet 100%, which is what vegans say, or 75%, already almost impossible, which is what the Atlantic Commission says. It's that half of the animal products that you eat, we hope to replace with alternative proteins. So you're still eating dairy and cheeses and yogurts and ice cream and meats. And they're as healthy or healthier than meats that come from animals, and they taste as good. I would say that MEATY first generation gets us halfway there with a chewy product that has a good taste and is completely healthy. The Impossible Burger gets us halfway there because it tastes like a burger and it has the texture of a burger. It's just the health ingredients have to be improved on. In the alternative protein business space, technology space, what's believed to be the first thing to break will be dairy made through fermentation. But it's a special type of fermentation that is actually very high temp. So what bored cow is it's animal free, but it's bioidentical to cow's milk. So if we can sort of make a rough guess that MEATY gets you halfway there, maybe 60%, this gets you 90% of the way there to being an exact equivalent of cow's milk. Alternative milks have come along in the last 10 years and taken 15% of the market in the United States.
Oh, you mean like oat milk?
Oat milk, yeah. So 15% less cow milk is being consumed right now. So that's a big win. So what this is it's whey, which is the the protein in cow's milk. With this, as it comes to scale, you can make yogurt that looks like and tastes like Greek yogurt. When we're all kids, the nursery rhyme, eating your curds and whey. So whey is the liquid stuff. Curds, small curd, cottage cheese. It's the basis of cheese. So all the great cheese in the world began with what is called farmer's cheese. It's cottage cheese. Not a lot of complexity of texture, but a lot of complexity of flavor. But then cheese makers learned over centuries to make very complicated, hard, semi-soft, semi-hard cheeses from these curd proteins. So these are the same curd protein. This is whey, but the same technology is used to make casein, which is the curd protein. And so there becomes the potential to replace cow, goat products with products that are made with non-animal whey and casein that is bioidentical to animal-made. And how has that happened? 40 years ago, the world's insulin for diabetics came from one of the body parts of cows and pigs, and I can't remember which one it is.
Probably the pancreas.
Pancreas, yes. Somehow they figured out that this natural thing helped to cure or stave off diabetes.
If you're interested in learning more about the fascinating story of insulin, I highly recommend The Song of the Cell. There's a chapter about it that tells the story, and if you just read that one chapter, you'll enjoy it. But I really recommend the entire book.
So this has been going on for a while. It was very expensive, and there wasn't enough of it. And so a company in Silicon Valley called Genentech, which then was 12 people, it's a very big company now, was teach microorganisms outside the cow to do exactly what microorganisms were doing inside the cow's or pig's pancreas. And instead of doing it inside the pancreas of an animal, they did it in a fermentation tank. Very expensive technology, but essentially it was a fermentation tank. They put the microbes in the tank. They put nutrients in. They put in a recipe. Now in the age of genetics, we have recipes for all sorts of shit. They put the microbes in, and the recipe is built into the DNA of these microbes. And what the microbes do in the tank is they move around and they eat the nutrients, and then they poop. And what they poop out is insulin, or what they excrete is insulin. The microorganisms are separated out, and you have a tank full of insulin. And within 10 years, it had 90% of the global market. In the next decade, the 90s, the same technology was used to make what is used to harden cheese. I forget, it's an enzyme. You can find out what it is. But again, over 15 years, by 2005, 90% of the world's cheese was made using this enzyme made with synthetic biology. Still, it was very expensive, but it was getting cheaper. And you could amortize it across cheese, it wasn't that expensive, or insulin was going to be expensive anyway.
One of the things I recall from when the synthetic insulin became common is one of its big advantages is it was more pure than the pig insulin, and that was an advantage.
No.
That some of the side effects of being on insulin disappeared or became less significant because you were getting more pure insulin than you could get from the pig pancreas.
Yeah.
In the context of food, it strikes me as a lot of the flavor comes from those impurities in the milk, what the French call the land. I mean, I'm not going to even try to say the French word. But they talk about that in terms of for wine and for cheese, that you have the flavor of the land because the cows ate this grass and not that grass. And the impurities have a importance to flavor.
Right.
In addition, some micronutrients might be part of that as well. So the fact that you're getting pure whey or pure casein is probably good for a food additive, but it might not be optimal for cheeses.
If we can make the protein, we can make the additive completely healthy way. And the other thing I would say from a business point of view is that is a problem for the next decade. So 10% of cheese in the United States goes on top of pizza. Most of it is low-grade mozzarella. Pizza chains use is not really very good, but it's not a complicated cheese to start with, mozzarella. So the company, that's their first target.
Makes sense.
And so the complexities that you bring up, they're trying to get to scale and get to a business case. So if they can get the pizza topping market based on cost and flavor being as good, cost being a lot less,
and texture is also important.
Right, and texture. Then in their R&D labs, they're working on that.
They're not going to be replacing a fine Camembert or Manchego right away. That those may come later, they may never come. Those may always be made with animal proteins, but if you can find a niche and serve that well, and then grow your technology, and you bit by bit gather other niches.
So right now, 15% of the milk sold in the United States is nut milks, one type or another. So this will compete with that. The yogurt, which is basically with bacteria, has not worked so far with the alternative milks. It's a huge market. So this will go after yogurt. If you separate them out, as with insulin, you have a pure product. It's pure whey. If you're climate conscious, you're trying to cut your footprint down with how you travel, with what's in your house. In the same way, the hope is the awareness campaign leads you to understand that basically where you have to get to is where your great-grandparents were.
But what we don't have right now is an awareness movement on food.
Correct.
In the 1970s, when Jimmy Carter was putting solar panels on the roof of the White House, and Jerry Brown was working on wind farms in California, those solar panels were very expensive and inefficient. The wind turbines killed a lot of birds and didn't generate a lot of power. But that started a movement that now, 50 years later, wind and solar are the cheapest ways to generate electricity, that they can be put almost anywhere. And so we've seen that movement. It's taken 50 years or 45 years. We don't have 45 years to wait on food, but we do have a model that worked with renewable energy. But we need to accelerate that movement in food.
Good.
Yeah.
So when did Jimmy Carter put the solar on the White House? He was in 79, say.
Yeah.
And when did Genentech introduce precision ferment? In 1984.
1984, yeah.
The point is, this one alternative protein technology has had 40 years to evolve, just like solar. This, which I bought a year ago for $35 a quart, the cost drop is directly equivalent to solar. So what it costs to make insulin to what it costs to make milk, it's the same curve. And this is just around the corner from being the same price as cow milk. So there is no awareness yet, but the technology cost curve has dropped to where it's almost consumer products price.
I would argue there's definitely an audience. There's not awareness.
Correct. And so that's the whole chasm that I've been involved in for the last year. So the Breyers lactose-free chocolate,
Mhm.
as opposed to vanilla,
Mhm.
is made, and they don't say it, but there's just something on it says animal-free. Oh,
It's small print.
it's chocolate ice cream. Right next to it on the shelf at QFC, at least a couple months ago, you could get vanilla lactose-free. This is just for the lactose-free people. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just testing it because there's no awareness about buying it. So the vanilla is made however they make it. The chocolate is made using the same Perfect Day as the company behind this, making the whey itself. They were making and selling a quart of chocolate ice cream at consumer prices.
Mhm.
They were charging the same amount for the chocolate as for the vanilla. So that is precision fermentation. Dairy is the first breakthrough.
Mhm.
It's not going to be camembert, but it
Yeah.
might very well be mozzarella, and it might very well be a deal with Pizza Hut in a couple of years. Trader Joe's, 12 ounces, $6. That's pretty close to the price of ground beef. So the first generation, or one generation of alternative proteins, are what's called plant-based foods.
Mhm.
There's been two basic competitors for the last 5 years, Beyond Beef and
Mhm.
Impossible. It's all plant-based. To get it to taste like hamburger, I mean, it's mostly plant stuff, but there are additives and, of course, salt. The way for them to get there was with additives, and it's become pretty popular. It does get 90% of the way to tasting what a hamburger tastes like. The new plant-based foods, with Impossible being, the most prominent one, are themselves evolving. So what I should add is the difference between Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger is that the Impossible, for flavor, uses precision fermentation in one thing. So 2% of the product is made with precision fermentation. Again, the microorganisms are separated out, so it's pure. In this case, what they're getting is something in the soybean. But they chose, instead of just harvesting soybeans in the field, to grow this one part of the soybean in a lab or in a fermentation tank. Therefore, PCC in Seattle, Puget Consumer Co-op, doesn't carry this because it hasn't gotten through their political filter yet to accept. They don't carry any of this stuff made with precision fermentation. So you can buy Beyond Burgers at Puget Co-op, but not this. It's a lack of awareness, the lack of tying this into climate and all sorts of things. It's very early days.
Do you know why PCC looks down upon precision fermentation? What is their concern? Is it a GMO kind of thing?
So my understanding is they haven't yet at a board level accepted precision fermentation products into their stores. Technology. So there's an awareness campaign, an education campaign, and we're just not there yet. The other type of fermentation, which doesn't use this advanced technology, is biomass fermentation. And this has been going on since the Neanderthals. Beer, wine, cheese, bread, fermentation goes back forever. Well, how can we take what we already have and use food knowledge that didn't exist, a century ago? So the best example of biomass fermentation is this, so far, as I know. There's no microorganisms that are, well, there are microorganisms because it's fermentation, but science has not pummeled these microorganisms into doing its will.
So places like Genentech that are doing precision fermentation, you take DNA from a different creature,
yes,
and inject it using, like you should say, pummel them in to a yeast,
yes,
which becomes a factory to make a desired protein or enzyme. And that's what newfangled precision fermentation is, as opposed to this is a yeast that naturally occurs or a bacteria that naturally occurs, and we are, through careful process, possibly maintaining temperature and salinity and pH, getting what we want without changing the organisms.
In the case of precision fermentation, it's advanced life science knowledge. In this case, it's all the world's traditions of fermentation. There's a huge skill set in how to make kimchi, how to make wine.
Yeah.
So these people said, well, what if we apply fermentation to mycelium root as a texturizing thing? So they drew from the wellspring of knowledge about fermentation, none of this advanced life science stuff.
But we've also seen the alternative milk really take off for some people because they're concerned about the environment, some because they're concerned about animal welfare, some people because they are allergic to one of the ingredients. There are lots of reasons people have gone to alternative milks, and it will be the same with the alternative proteins. I have a alternative milk that tastes more like real milk. In recipes, it behaves like real milk. It has no animal cruelty issue. It has low greenhouse gas emissions. There's an audience ready for that if the product exists. I agree with you. There's not a lot of awareness of
Right.
all of this stuff we've talked about today.
There was far more awareness of climate and energy related products 15 years ago than there is on climate and food right now.
I completely agree. And my videos on my channel, I've talked about food and agriculture in maybe 10% of my videos. The 90% of them are looking more at energy. This conversation has increased my awareness that that's something I need to talk more about.
What has gotten a lot of attention in the media because it's so curious is the third category of alternative, which is it doesn't even have a set name. It's based upon the idea. To simplify here, you still have that fermentation tank. You introduce microorganisms, but you also introduce cells from a cow. And the script for the microorganisms is something like use the recipe we've given you to eat the nutrient and turn these all into cells. So at the end of the process, it's a 5,000 gallon tank. It's all filled with beef cells. There's funding for it. There's enormous promise. So there's about 5 restaurants around the world, mostly in Singapore, Israel, and the United States, that at least were allowed to serve it. So it's a science project at this point. The vegan model saying we have to stop completely. And so they're saying, yeah, people are never going to change. They're gonna want their steak every day. And so we can grow the steak. And we can get to a point, again, using fermentation, but in a different way, but starting with animal cells where you can, you take 10 cells and you get a whole cow's worth of meat in it, 200 pounds or whatever, of meat out of it. So the marketing, the philosophical orientation, the political orientation, the difference between that and veganism, it's huge. If you want to be a vegan, great. If you can figure out how to make 16-ounce steaks a cut like they used to eat in Kansas City, great. But the only thing close to coming to the market in a serious way is the precision fermentation stuff and the biomass fermentation stuff.
Maybe I'm wrong. My impression is the precision fermentation is already in market as additives. You mentioned the cheese enzyme, and I can imagine if you were just buying whey for a protein powder.
I think now you can get a supplement. I'm talking about mainstream food. My orientation is the need for a massive awareness campaign, first among the active people in the world, and then the general public, and for a solution set that combines dietary change with alternative proteins.
So with my background in product development, what interests me and what I see as exciting is the development of a new technology that is becoming over time serving larger markets in a more cost-effective way. And that's been happening quietly up till now, because if you're just selling whey protein and your buyer looks at your purities, they're really good. They look at your cost and your reliability. They're like, I don't care about this other stuff. I'm really happy with this product just because it fits a need I have. And so people have been having these precision protein outputs for years without even knowing
it's way on the margins.
That's where it starts. The addressable market becomes larger and larger. And at some point, you want to leverage the fact that this is cruelty-free or low greenhouse gas or doesn't use acreage. You want to start leveraging those facts in your value proposition. They've always had those values, but their current customers don't care about. They don't value that it's cruelty-free if they're just making a protein powder for weightlifters. But when you're looking at a product like this or like this, there's a cost differential between the traditional or a taste and texture difference. I'm not going to say it's worse, but it's different. So you need to leverage these other values of cruelty-free and low greenhouse gas and low water content. And so the messaging is becoming important because it's moving into new markets.
That's a hopeful way. Another way is that, similar to renewable energies, this has followed a learning curve and is almost at the point of consumer products. And there's such an enormous lack of awareness that the first generation of products of companies are going to fail. Perfect Day is actually an example. They started out thinking that they could actually make a consumer product, and they realized that it was a mountain of problems. So they went back to just making the whey and finding partners. Buyers is a temporary partner, just like all of these. Without any political or social impetus, the companies are putting toes in and then backing away.
Right. So it's up to people like us to increase awareness that this even exists. Because I completely agree with you. it's so obvious that there's no awareness of this. Traditional fermentation is obviously scalable. We've been doing that for, as long as we've been human, or at least from the dawn of agriculture. At least 10,000 years we've been doing fermentation. Precision fermentation, we've got 40 years of experience,
including safety experience.
right? Safety in highly regulated areas. So we have good experience on that, and it is a scalable technology. And the cultured meat is an interesting science experiment. So, Larry, I just want to thank you for you sharing your passion and your experience and your knowledge and all of this that you've done around this vision of a world where we can feed everyone without trashing the planet. I want to thank you for all that and for the delicious meal.
It's been enjoyable. I'm glad you came. And don't forget the picture above your head is of people melting from climate change.